Hello, I'm Charlie Rapple. I'm one of the co-founders of Kudos. And over the last 5 years, we've developed a platform for managing the dissemination of research to help authors and publishers increase reach and impact. And one of the things that we do is encourage authors to share their work more actively. But crucially, we focus on copyright compliant ways to do this and on centralizing and tracking these efforts so that publishers can better support and benefit from them. Another grouping of publishers for you in that context, we've been working with a big group that you see here to create something that we've loosely called the Fair Share Network, and we're prototyping possible solutions that will help publishers to see scholarly collaboration networks as discovery channels and to leverage that rather than trying to displace them or shut them down or compete with them. And our focus is very much on fitting within current author workflows. So we started by trying to understand researchers' choices, preferences, expectations around sharing in order to flesh out the framework into which any solution is going to have to fit. So last year we did a survey of 7,500 researchers, and I'll walk you through some of the headline findings now, and then move on to some wider context, and then the early results of the solution that we have just launched. We asked researchers about which networks they use and how often, and you can hopefully see here that ResearchGate, academia.edu and Mendeley are the most commonly used networks in terms of the N numbers here, which is the number of people that indicated familiarity with each of those networks. Oh, excuse me. But usage of ResearchGate is substantially more frequent, with over a quarter of ResearchGate users in the survey indicating that they use the site at least daily, another 41% indicating that they use the site at least weekly, and 18% at least monthly. So in total, 85% indicating that they use ResearchGate at least weekly. When we compare this to the Nature study, which appeared on somebody's slide earlier, the 2014 study of sharing behaviours of about 3,000 researchers, that had a similar figure. So in that one, 88% of ResearchGate users said they were visiting the site at least monthly. We had 85%, but the breakdown is changing in favour of more frequent usage. In 2014, only 8% of ResearchGate users visited the site daily, as compared to 26% in our 2017 study. So SCNs, ResearchGate in particular perhaps, are not a last resort. As we know, they're a daily resource, and increasingly so. And that's also borne out by a shift in what researchers say they're doing with these sites. Again, we've touched on that a bit. It was previously the perception that researchers were just using them as a kind of digital CV. And the Nature study had 1,500 users of ResearchGate, and 68% said they just used it in case contacted, and that was the most popular reason they gave for using this site. And in 2014, only 35% said they were using it to post their work or to discover and access other work. Whereas in our 2017 study, we found that the most popular purpose for which SCNs were being used was to access otherwise inaccessible content. 66% of researchers were using these sites to access content, 57% were using them to upload their own work. They're separate studies, can't draw a longitudinal comparison, but I'm going to do that anyway. So the difference between 35% sharing and accessing work via ResearchGate in 2014, just 3 years later, 60% doing that. That's an alarming growth rate. As well as asking researchers about their sharing behaviours, we also asked them about their views on copyright. And perhaps surprisingly, given the sharing behaviours they had just acknowledged, 83% agreed or strongly agreed that copyright should be respected. On the other hand, 60% agreed or strongly agreed that they should be entitled to upload their work to scholarly collaboration networks regardless. And when you talk to people and flesh this out, it's clear that researchers do value copyright, but they also, perhaps more, value convenience. So networks provide an easy way to promote themselves without being seen to be too self-promotional. And uploading work is also convenient because it reduces the flow of requests via email for, can I have a copy of your article, please? So SCNs are putting a lot of ticks in the convenience box. And given that the only way you can list your work on ResearchGate or academia is by uploading a PDF, you can't just add a link to it. Convenience ends up trumping conscience, and authors end up sharing the full text, even if they feel a bit uncomfortable about the copyright implications. And it's also important to remember that SCNs are not the only ways that researchers are sharing copies of full text. They email copies to colleagues who send them requests. They post copies on their website, in the repository, in subject repositories. And with the rise of the various services that will help people find a free copy of anything for which you've hit a paywall, those author copies are increasingly visible and increasingly fragmenting the usage of scholarly publications so that it's accruing in lots of different places, which is useful in some respects as a reader, but unhelpful if you're trying as an author or institution or funder to get a sense of the readership of the work. Sorry. A couple of new developments since the survey. Firstly, the publication of Hamid Jamali's study of ResearchGate, which found that in his sample of over 500 articles, 40% contravened copyright. And meanwhile, as we've touched on, publishers have been negotiating with ResearchGate, have succeeded in bringing about some changes to ResearchGate's terms and conditions, and indeed to some of its functionality and the availability of content. Which is good, but on the other hand, ResearchGate is effectively there paying lip service to publishers' rights, but still encouraging authors to share in a way that fragments the usage and effectively cannibalizes the publisher website usage. And it is tricky for publishers to know how to respond, as we've discussed. Legal challenges have had some impact, but they're not welcomed by authors. They feel like a blunt approach on a practical level. They haven't actually helped publishers to reclaim lost usage. And meanwhile, again, as we've heard, individual publishers and various providers have been working on new linking infrastructure and capabilities, but you can't post a link by itself into ResearchGate. So the read-only links from projects like SharedIt and ReadCube are solving a different problem. It's a problem that needs to be solved, but it's not the ResearchGate problem. The only way, as I said, it's for authors to list their work in these sites is to upload a PDF. So I took the view of, well, let's give them a PDF then, but one that links through to the full text and builds rather than cannibalizes the usage and consolidates it and rather than fragments it. And that means we can leverage researchers' continued use of these platforms. We can harness them as discovery channels rather than trying to compete with them or displace them. And we can actually create some useful added value content at the same time that can also be used by authors to promote their work in their own websites or institutional websites or repositories and so on. So this is what we've been working on. We've launched it in the last couple of months. It builds on our existing service, our existing integrations into pre-publication workflows, our existing reporting suite for publishers and authors, and I'll show you the shareable PDF idea that we come up with. And the idea is that it helps the researcher to square that circle of conscience versus convenience. Makes it easy for you to upload a PDF that promotes your work, provides some useful content related to the work, and provides access to the full text, but doesn't provide the full text itself. So it looks like this, and it contains, as you can see, a kind of plain language summary, which helps to explain the research for broader audiences, and it can contain any other added value that the author has added, so links to other related materials and so on. And then critically, it's got that trackable link back to the full text on the publisher website. And we can create these before publication because we're integrated into manuscript submission systems and those workflows. We can create them at publication, after publication. We can email them to authors and make it more convenient for this to be the thing that you upload because it's sitting right there in your inbox. And here's what it looks as one of the authors that's done this. So you can see how that's the articles page in ResearchGate. And then sitting in the place where the full text might otherwise be is the summary with the link back to the publisher website. And so it's helping to continue to build the traffic on ResearchGate, which is good for them, but also let that traffic come into the publisher site, which is good for you. And it increases publication impact and helps to protect your subscription revenue. So you can see how the reads on ResearchGate for that article have contributed to the reads on the publisher website. But I think perhaps more interesting from my perspective is that it also helps to surface and measure and learn more about sharing and usage via many PDF-based systems. So how many researchers are sharing work in that format? How many different sites are they using? Which ones? How heavily? And how does this compare to other dissemination methods, such as promoting work with links in social media or email or whatever, which I think is really critical to put the whole discussion into perspective. If the PDFs that they're sharing are gaining less visibility or being less viewed than the other mechanisms that they're sharing by, then that helps to maybe recalibrate our approach to this. As I said, we've integrated with existing processes and systems to make it really convenient for authors, and we've also partnered with ReadCube so that we can integrate those trusted links into shareable PDF, which paves the way for a similar integration with the outcomes from the STM TAPAS project and other mechanisms that enable shareable PDF to provide free access to the full text. So this isn't about shutting down access, it's just about enabling that access to be better tracked. So an author would start by adding the ingredients of their shareable PDF, either before publication at manuscript submission or at or after publication via the Kudos website. And then you can either create that shareable PDF straight away if the article has already been published, or you'll get an email notification that it's ready if you started the process before publication. And then you can upload this to scholarly collaboration networks, your own website, your institution's website, and so on. Lots of scenarios in which the explanation and the other added value content can be useful for increasing the range of people who will find or understand that work. And the key, I think, is that although individual authors could do something like this for themselves, or publishers could create kind of cover pages that might sort of do some of this, if everybody's working through a central system, it's consistent for authors, they get to do this in the same way across all the places they publish. All the metrics and data from all these stages of the process, including the reader click-throughs on the PDFs, the publisher usage data, etc., is all captured together in one place, shown back to the author in their dashboard, shown to the publisher or the institution in their dashboard. So it's giving insight not only into the PDF sharing, but putting that in the context of all the other kinds of sharing that people do. And so you can start to benchmark what's more prevalent, what's more successful in terms of different approaches to sharing, not only looking at the PDF piece in isolation. So this shareable PDF has been in beta release for about 8 weeks for a handful of publishers. It's been available as part of our existing Kudos workflow for researchers, therefore, but we haven't yet promoted it massively to them because we're still working on the snags and so on. Nonetheless, almost 400 authors have found this option and used it, which is a pretty good level of uptake, I think, in such a short space of time. And between them, they've shared over 500 articles. So that's curious to me, or interesting to me, because they're not only sharing their most recent publications, about 20% of them are going back in to create a shareable PDF for an older paper. So they're obviously liking the process and the outcomes. And what's also interesting is that it's not replacing the sharing that people were already tracking via Kudos. So for one publisher, the number of publications being shared per day has doubled since Shareable PDF was launched. So the blue line is the actual, the yellow dotted line is the trend of what it has been, and then look what changed at the point when Shareable PDF was launched. Suddenly the blue line went off at a very different trajectory. So I think that's really interesting and relates back to this next point, which is that PDF is already proving to be a more popular way of sharing than all of the other types of sharing that we're tracking put together, which again kind of brings us back to the point about new linking infrastructures and mechanisms. We've been running a link sharing system for 5 years. The PDF option we have just launched has come in and dwarfed that. So it's vital that we incorporate the PDF container approach in whatever support we provide for researchers sharing, because the link by itself isn't enough. And sharing via PDF channels is clearly more popular than any of the other approaches. So authors are doing this, they like it, they like Shareable PDF because it retains the value of the scholarly collaboration networks. So their metrics, their view counts and so on in ResearchGate and academia are continuing to build. But it also improves the publisher download metrics that are being reported back to their institution or their funder and so on. So they're kind of getting a 1 + 1 = 3 if you hadn't clocked what was going on there. And they also like Shareable PDF and Kudos because it brings a certain amount of simplicity and consistency to a complicated sharing landscape. They're swamped with channels, different ways of sharing their work, and that's further complicated, as we've acknowledged today, by different policies from publishers and societies, different technologies, and that's just for publications. Obviously, of course, that's a small part of what a researcher is producing and promoting. So we're trying to help people knit this all together so they can tell a compelling story about their work to a variety of different audiences, measure this across a range of metrics in one place, and make evidence-based decisions about the best way to maximize engagement with their work. Conscious of time, Outsell really got the strategic advantages of this. It's about addressing a core industry issue collaboratively in a way that's complementary to other cross-industry initiatives such as TAPAS. Even publishers with their own link sharing solutions can benefit from this. That was pretty much their assumption. And ultimately, it is a live solution. It has successfully launched with authors. You can switch this on right now for your content to start tracking and reporting on and benefiting directly from content usage in other networks and channels. It's helping you to move quickly to transition authors to a copyright compliant approach to sharing, but to protect the relationship with authors by doing this in a convenient, simple, positive, proactive way, rather than trying to restrict or penalise what is ultimately a very natural and desirable author behaviour. Thank you for my 3 extra minutes.